Walking was the first and original means of transportation. For hundreds of years, men have walked by foot to get to their destinations. And with much of the human population being nomadic, people traveled frequently. Walking long distances wasn't the only burden. People could only travel with the amount of things that they were able to carry with them. Finally, after many generations, the horse came along. The domestication of the horse impacted travel greatly. Now the people wouldn't have to worry about carrying their own belongings. The benefits of traveling by horse is that horses don't tire slowly. They're also much stronger, so carrying all the extra weight wasn't so bad. Another benefit is that not only do horses carry belongings, they can also carry people. The old or the sick can now travel with their family without holding them back. But one limitation of the horse was that without a carriage, a horse could only carry what was placed on its back. And with the change from nomadic to a settled life, horses can carry more, thus creating the horse-drawn carriage. The horse-drawn carriage was created so that more people and goods could be carried. Farmers were very happy with inventions of the carriage because it allowed them to transport their goods more easily. Horse-drawn carriages could also hold more people. A limitation of the horse-drawn carriage is that you would still have to give the horse brakes, and horses can only pull so much weight. Soon, though, the horse would be replaced by the steam engine.
To accommodate for the many changes about to happen in transportation, roads, canals, and railways needed to be built or improved upon. These improvements made traveling safer and allowed for more efficient transportation of goods and people. All over Europe, roads were being built and improved. Before the roads were improved, they were just uneven dirt paths which had large ruts in them from the constant wearing of the wheels of carriages that passed over them. Roads were not an ideal choice of transportation of goods because their conditions were rapidly deteriorating, the point where they became unsafe for travelers to use. Governments at that time did not finance the upkeep of roads, but the roads desperately needed to be improved upon, so companies called turnpikes were created to repair and maintain the roads. These companies created flat, hard-wearing roads through the use of crushed rock and large flat stones. Once these roads were repaired, the companies created toll stations and charged travelers for the use of these improved roads. Some road travelers were angered by having to pay for the use of the roads, and riots were held at the toll stations. The European government eventually took over the responsibility of maintaining the roads, so turnpikes were no longer needed. All these improvements made travel by horse-drawn carriage easier, but the method of transportation was soon surpassed when the canals and railroads were created. Canals, which are man-made waterways, were built connecting inland cities to rivers which led out to the ocean. Canals allowed goods to be shipped faster, safer, cheaper, and in larger quantities than they could have been previously. Before the arrival of the steamboat, a system of locks had been made in canals to allow barges to travel upstream. Canals were a much better form of transportation than roads, but once a locomotive came along, the building of canals ceased. Before locomotives could be used, railroads needed to be built. Companies were created to build and run the railways. The building of the railways was financed by industries eager to get their goods farther faster. Railways had to be built by hand, which created many jobs, boosting the economy. Railway construction also greatly benefited the iron and coal industries, creating even more jobs. The building of the railroads laid the foundation for one of the greatest inventions of all time, the locomotive.
Before the Industrial Revolution, there were no forms of motorized transportation, but that all changed when the power of steam was harnessed. Steam was one of the greatest technical achievements of the Industrial Revolution and was a great choice for an energy source because it was cheap and convenient to use. Steam engines were not the invention of a single person, but rather the combination of various inventors' ideas. One of the first uses of steam was in steam engines developed for use in mining coal. The first model engines required great amounts of expensive fuel and other materials, which made it inconvenient to use. Years later, a person named James Watt, a mathematical instrument maker from Scotland, noticed the defects in the original steam engines and introduced a new design which allowed the steam engines to run more efficiently by using only minimal amounts of fuel. Many of the factories built before the Industrial Revolution were built along the rivers, so the goods produced could be transported using water. At that time, transport via water was the cheapest and the most reliable way to trade heavy goods, which allowed the steamboat to be very successful. An American inventor named Robert Fulton bought a steam engine from Watt to build a steamboat called the Clermont. His experiment with the new engine for his boat was extremely successful, and it ferried passengers through the Hudson River. Steamboats were so revolutionary because they were able to travel upstream without the use of locks. Steamboats were high in demand because they could travel upstream, were very efficient, and able to carry more people and larger quantities of goods. But the steamboat was soon surpassed by its counterpart, which traveled over land. The railway age began when the steam-driven locomotive was invented, and it quickly took over as the lead in transportation. The invention of the steam-driven locomotive allowed goods to be moved without the use of the rivers or canals. The locomotive increased the distances over which trade could occur and allowed goods to be transported faster, cheaper, and in higher quantities than they had ever before. Richard Trevithick built an early model of a steam-driven locomotive that later influenced early railroad engineers like George Stephenson. Stephenson, who had already built many productive engines for mine operators, worked on the world's first railroad line. In 1825, the line opened with 4 locomotives built by Stephenson, and it ran 27 miles from Yorkshire to Stockton. The success of the locomotive spread rapidly in Britain. Soon, another railroad line that opened and connected Liverpool to Manchester, featuring Stephenson's locomotive, the Rocket. The Rocket was capable of transporting a 13-ton load at a speed of 24 miles per hour, which was an amazing speed back then, and it was an instant sensation. Through the use of locomotive, communication became easier and the news were able to travel far more quickly. Towns along the railways grew drastically due to sudden influx of people traveling on locomotives in search of jobs. Railroads spurred the growth of many industries from agriculture to mining. All of these sudden changes in transportation made the Industrial Revolution possible and paved the way for the transportation as we know it today.